So you can see it in a little way, which is that if you sacrifice yourself for others, then you actually can become the foundation for the relationship and for even relationships between others, right? You can see that it's a simple way to understand it would be like a good host. Like a good host will sacrifice their own desires and needs to receive others into their home. And by doing that, then they become the source of a relationship, even between the people that are there. They become a way for them to connect they become a space for relationship. So that's a little way to understand it. But of course you can raise that up to higher, which is, you see your president or you see a leader, you see them sacrifice themselves for the nation or for a country or for a cause. And in that sacrifice, it becomes the foundation for the thing to actually exist. It becomes the model. So it doesn't mean that everybody that's there will have to suffer the way that the martyrs or the highest forms suffer, but they realize that it's through that suffering that things actually end up existing.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tammy Peterson podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Today, my guest is Jonathan Pageau. I spoke to Jonathan a number of times, mostly on the Holy Rosary of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Today, we focused on the Crucifixion. We more specifically focused on suffering and redemption. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and thanks again for tuning in. Good morning, Jonathan. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. I see you're in the hotel world.
I am. I am for months and months and months. 3 months.
How has the health and strength and everything been keeping up with the traveling?
I'm doing just fine, and Dr. Peterson is hanging in there, I would say. He's hanging in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I see a little bit of improvement, as we go.
Okay.
I think it's hard for him to see it, but I think he's getting stronger in his lectures.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always a slow road back to health whenever you've had something happen. So
yeah, of course. So
what have you been up to, Jonathan? I know you've been launching your graphic novel. What else have you been up to, and how's that been going?
Yeah, I mean, I've been busy trying to consolidate everything is like the best way to understand it, because I'm doing too many things and I love all of them. So I have a carving assistant now, and I feel like finally things are really working well for him to take care of what he needs to take care of. I have an assistant for videos. So I've been trying to consolidate that. So for several months, I didn't carve because I just couldn't. There was too many things going on. And now I feel like I'm able to start at least, carve several hours a week and do the videos, because I'm going to write a book this year. And so I need to make sure everything is nice and stable and in place, because if I don't, then I'll never be able to write the book. So that's pretty much what I've been trying to do. And it's been going okay. It's been going well.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I just started reading your brother's book.
Okay.
And it's really well written. It's so straightforward, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I haven't gone very far into it, but I'm going to read the rest of it in the next couple of days, I think.
Great. Yeah. I tell people wait until about page 60, page 70, then all of a sudden, that's when things start to, all of a sudden you'll actually have, some people have to put the book down a little bit because it starts to change the way you see the world. And so it actually can be a little bit dizzying, but hopefully I'm really looking forward to hearing what you think when you're done.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely talk to you again. I think that it'll be really something. From the times that we've spoken, just to read what he's saying, I'm thinking, yes. So I'm looking forward to it. And with a lot of what I've been doing, trying to live with a more spiritual understanding of everything, I think it'll be really super helpful to me. I really, it's it's as if this is something that I've been looking for a long time. So
that's great.
Yeah.
So what did you want to talk about today? I got your email, but I wasn't sure I totally got it.
Well, I don't totally get it either, but I was through the night about a week ago or 2 weeks ago when I talked to you, I was thinking about the wounds on Christ's body when he's crucified and the significance of those wounds to my access to the, coming in in humility to try to be in humility and grateful, in that framework through the wounds of Christ. And I thought, wow, now what in the heck does that mean? But it kept coming back to me, this thought. And so I contacted you. I thought I need to look at this a little further.
Yeah, there's, the idea of the wounds of Christ are very important, especially in the West, in the medieval Catholic tradition. Mm-hmm. There's a friend of mine who, well, actually, there's a early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century symbolist who wrote a book that was just published recently because his papers were lost and they were just published. It's called The Vulnerary of Christ. And it's basically an analysis of just how important the wounds of Christ have been in the story of Christianity in the Middle Ages. Mm-hmm. And there's a sense in which they represented sometimes even as gems, as these precious gems that are there. And you see them all around. Like if you look at the road crosses, like in Quebec, for example, they have these crosses that were put at crossroads. And often the nails are really important. The different aspects, the nails are put there to kind of signify the different wounds of Christ. So it's definitely very important. So what is it that you, let's say, what do you see as the connection between your experience and the wounds, for example?
Well, I've been trying to be less controlling, less domineering, less, with all the things that we do, that we blame and we get angry and all of these things when we come from a place of fear, usually, or a place, I see it as my younger self, coming to help me out when I run into something that makes me uncomfortable. And then I end up, so I had an experience just this week that was really new. I was hungry. And I was so sick, right? I was so sick. And for a long time, the doctors told me I couldn't eat because all I eat is meat. And they said, oh, you can't have all that protein because the markers in your kidneys are so high that that's going to ruin your other kidney. So they terrified me. So then I ate less than a pound of meat a day for months and months. I was just starving. Hey, I was just not eating enough. So I was always hungry, but I had myself trained not to eat anything. And then they came back a year later and said, well, no, they did a check of my kidneys as if I was going to give one of my kidneys away. So they did a thorough check to see that it was a healthy kidney in every way. They said it's healthy in every way. You can eat whatever you want.
Okay.
And so, I've trained myself not to eat. And I've never had this problem before. I imagine someone with an eating disorder might have had this kind of problem where you've trained yourself not to eat. Yeah. So one night we were going out to do a show and we were eating on the bus, and what I was eating was kind of dry and not very palatable. And I decided to, in the middle of dinner, to go and get changed for the show and come back and finish it. In the meantime, Jordan decided to clean the kitchen and he threw my dinner away. He was just trying to be helpful, but he misunderstood what I was doing. Anyway, that didn't matter. So I didn't eat. And then later that night, after the show was over, there were carnivore crisps. We buy these carnivore crisps that are really, really salty, dried meat. Mm-hmm. They're good, but they make you drink a gallon of water afterwards because they're so salty. Anyway, I looked at this bag of crisps and I said, no, to myself, no. So I denied myself that food for some reason. So the next morning, we were in hotels and I didn't have any food in the hotel, but we were going to get on the bus at 10:30. And I thought, well, then I'm going to eat. And it was 10 o'clock and I'd been up at 7 doing Pilates because I have to do Pilates twice a week to keep the scar tissue all organized in my body so I don't have chronic pain from all the surgery I went through. So, I have a pretty regimented life. And so I did all this thing, but now I was hungry. And Jordan called me at 10 and said, do you think we could leave at noon? I'd like to sleep 2 hours more. And I said, could you sleep on the bus? I'm really hungry. And he goes, no, he said, I'd like to just sleep.
He didn't understand exactly.
No, he didn't. He didn't know.
No,
he didn't. He was kind of sleepy, right?
Yeah.
And I thought for a minute, and I thought, well, he's the guy, and he needs to sleep. And so I said, okay. And so I hung up the phone, and this rage went. Oh, I was like,
hunger will make you feel.
Yeah, I was like, what's that? It was really rage. And so I prayed. I thought, oh, this isn't a good thing to have domineering my thoughts right now. So I prayed. I prayed the Serenity Prayer. And as soon as I was done praying the Serenity Prayer, which is helpful, right? Because you accept the things you cannot change and you have the courage to change the things you can and the wisdom to know the difference. And so it kind of starts to humble you. And then I got a text from one of our assistants who said, oh, Tammy, can I go to the bus and cook you some lamb and bring it to you? And I thought, oh, Jordan contacted the assistants after he spoke to me. Mm-hmm. And I can trust him. I can trust him. And, for some reason, I wasn't trusting him. Mm-hmm. Those are long stories, but it makes no difference. It's that this prayer, bringing me back to a humble place, allowed me to be grateful when to notice the assistant had contacted me, because I'm trying to be present. I'm getting myself back into a normal frame of mind. And I said, no. I said, I'm ready to go. I'll just go down to the lobby and wait for the bus. I go down to the lobby and the bus just pulls up. And I said, is that our bus? I mean, it just really, there was a big black bus and it came and I thought, is that our bus? And I looked and I think that's the driver. Wow, what's it doing here? Because the theater's quite a ways away and that's where it parks in the morning. But he was on his way to pick us up and then heard that Jordan wanted to sleep for 2 hours. And he thought it was just simpler to park in front of the hotel without anybody saying anything to him. Mm-hmm. He pulled up and I walked outside and he was there. And I said, I am so overjoyed to see you. I said, it was like a miracle. I was going to get some food, and I got on the bus and I sat down and I put something in the air fryer and I was just so grateful. It was like a spiritual experience for me because I was so hungry and I thought I was, completely out of luck. And then as it turned out, the calmness and then everything just transpired. Like it just unfolded for me. Mm-hmm. And this is like in a 5-minute window. So it was pretty intense.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, so this is what I've been trying to do. I've been trying to stay as present as I can, to be there when things align for me, and to notice them and to be, to be grateful for it, because you can always, something can happen and you don't see it because you're thinking of other things. You're not present. And so that happened recently. But 2 weeks ago, when I had this thought about Christ and his wounds and how important that must be for me, I'm trying to find my humility in a big way and to stay there. And I need more and more understanding of what it means to be humble and what the necessity for humility.
Yeah. I mean, I think that your example is good, especially as it kind of progressed and how it ended up happening for you, which is the wounds of Christ are very difficult, I think, to understand. And it's like the type of stuff that it's hard to talk about without maybe freaking people out. And but I mean, that we'll do it and we'll see.
You're so thoughtful. You're so thoughtful.
We'll see what happens. So the idea, the problem is suffering, the problem is suffering. And the problem is, how do we relate to suffering? And how is it that Christ transforms the nature of suffering through his crucifixion? Because if you look at the Christian story, there's a sense in which martyrdom, for example, is a glorious thing. And this is something that it's difficult for people to understand because they just see it as a kind of zealotry. Sometimes they see it as, oh, you die for your God. But there's something more which is going on, which has to do with the way in which we approach our own suffering and how it transforms that suffering into something else, actually something which is very powerful and very, very high. And so that is what has to do with suffering. So you can understand that Christ, the way that it's really represented is that Christ's wounds that he receives, he's humble, like you said, he accepts to be nailed down, he accepts to suffer, and he accepts to be pierced. Then that piercing is transformed into the gushing blood. This is weird for people, but the gushing blood ends up being something like a fountain or something like a glorious outpouring into the world. And it's a weird type of imagery that can seem gory for people, and sometimes it has become gory even in the way it's represented, especially in later Western art. There's this kind of emphasis on suffering, and in the Orthodox tradition, we don't tend to go there as well, but I can still understand it. That really is this transformation of suffering into glory, and if we accept suffering, and we do it, like you said, with humility, then that suffering can become something like the foundation for reality. It can become something like a type of glory that will reset the world in a way. So you can see it in a little way, which is that if you sacrifice yourself for others, then you actually can become the foundation for the relationship and for even relationships between others, right? You can see that it's a simple way to understand it would be like a good host. Like a good host will sacrifice their own desires and needs to receive others into their home. And by doing that, then they become the source of a relationship, even between the people that are there. They become a way for them to connect they become a space for relationship. So that's a little way to understand it. But of course, you can raise that up to higher, which is, you see your president or you see a leader, you see them sacrifice themselves for the nation or for a country or for a cause. And in that sacrifice, it becomes the foundation for the thing to actually exist. It becomes the model. So it doesn't mean that everybody that's there will have to suffer the way that the martyrs or the highest forms suffer, but they realize that it's through that suffering that things actually end up existing. So I think that's a way to understand it. And in your case, it's as if your acceptance to suffer then transformed everything. Not only transformed everything, but made something which at first glance is somewhat mundane, right? It's like, okay, the bus shows up and then you end up having food. It's like, it's an ordinary thing, but it transformed everything into a magical, almost, a magical experience. And it's like, wouldn't we all want to live in that magical experience all the time, where all these small things that come to you appear as these blessings from heaven? And because they are ultimately, it's just that we live in this mechanical causation, and we're so bored with everything that we don't see it. But by realizing your suffering and by accepting it, all of a sudden, very ordinary things became, like the gift that you got from the bus coming there and being able to eat is equivalent to someone else buying a new car, and like they bought a new car and they had to spend all this money to get a little jolt of life, but it was this little thing and it brought you this great joy. So
yes, that's a good explanation of what it was like. You know, in the beginning of my experience of suffering, really, although I think that, you know, from the time I was a little kid, I had a stomach ache. I've always kind of been suffering physically with discomfort. And so I think I've always been on this road to spiritual understanding. But when I was diagnosed with that terminal cancer and went to and decided that I would die, and then went to see my son to tell him whatever happened in that moment, you know, that parent-child love that was that became really obvious to me at that moment. Completely, it was like there was some sort of neurochemical change in my system, you know, that I went from thinking one way to realizing that wasn't the way to think anymore, and from now on I was going to think this way. And maybe neurochemicals. Yeah.
It really is. We call it metanoia. It's a change in intelligence. Like there's a term that exists, like a shift in intelligence, or a shift in it's more than intelligence in the sense of just your thoughts, but it's actually like the very mode of being that changes. And you all of a sudden experience and see reality through a whole new lens, maybe.
Yes. And so how do you describe that from the stories of the Bible, that kind of change?
You mean which stories talk? There are many.
Yeah.
I mean, there are obviously many. The whole idea of repentance has to do with this, of course. You know, the notion repentance, of course, has to do with humility, maybe in a different way than what you experience, but it has to do with recognizing your own faults and kind of owning your own faults. And then when that happens and you own your own faults and realize that you all in a way don't have the power to change that. But sometimes when that happens, all of a sudden the power does come to you and you actually can change, you know, and someone who has had, let's say, a really bad habit for a long time and suddenly experiences that and has that transformation and suddenly is freed from that bad habit. You know, you all of a sudden you're just free from it. You don't even know. It doesn't mean you're not in danger to go back at some point. But even that moment that you can experience where you're suddenly free of that bad habit and you're looking around, you're like, what? Like, how is you don't even recognize yourself anymore. You're like, who's that person before who was a slave of this? You don't even. So there's these transformational shifts that usually come with, like you said, a form of humility, but it can be a form of repentance. It can be a form of accepting your circumstances. It can be all these different things which suddenly free you from a burden and you can shift. And sometimes it's more radical than that. You find the story of the conversion of St. Paul, for example, is, I mean, it's so radical. He basically was killing Christians. And then he's on the road to go kill a bunch of Christians. And suddenly it just switches on him. It just flips where he realizes that he's basically going the wrong way. And something like a light comes from heaven, you know, he falls off his horse. It's this really radical moment of transformation. And he becomes even blind for a few days where he can't see anything. It's like his whole world is shifting.
I think that's true. Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
And suddenly
the
you can
blindness.
see. So that's something that happens to people for all in all kinds of reasons. These are real experiences. You can have them at small levels, but then sometimes you can have very large ones where, you know, you really are. And then there's no other way to describe it besides a theophany. Besides something like I saw God, or I saw light, I saw an angel. There's something happened to me, and then I can't even describe. And it's weird because sometimes it seems to be related to a process someone has been on, like some kind of work that they've done, whether it's a kind of repentance or attention to their own circumstances. And sometimes it just seems to drop out of nowhere. And people just have these experiences and then they don't know. I have a friend of mine who was like a kind of he was a day trader, and he lived alone with his dog, and he didn't want a steady girlfriend. Like, he was just like this guy who was just making a lot of money. And one day he was driving on the road, and all of a sudden something hit him, like a flash of transformation hit him. He almost had an accident and stopped on the side of the road, and his life has changed ever since. Like, he's like, I'm a Christian. I don't know what that means. Like, what is going on? I think I'm a Christian. Then he's like going to ask priests and pastors, like, can you explain what happened to me? Can you help me understand what's happened? And so I think that that's possible as well. It's hard to explain why.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
Something like that, something sudden. But now, because I am asking for God's will in the morning and seeing, and then being grateful for how the day is unfolding, and noticing how things, that blindness that you talk about, I pause, right? So if I come up to a time that's uncomfortable, instead of reacting, I pause. That's like the blind part of it, right? Where I'm pausing and I'm not doing anything, and I'm waiting, because I don't know what to do. It's out of my hands. So I'm waiting to see what there is for me next. And I can kind of see that is, I think that's what is being talked about when St. Paul is blinded for a period of time. Because when you have a misunderstanding, I think that it's unusual to be told right away what to do.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you can't hear it sometimes also, like when
right, and maybe you're told right away and you didn't see it, so then you got to wait even longer. Yeah. And so maybe that's why you have to wait, is because you didn't see it, probably. Hey, that's probably what it is.
And I mean, I think that's so there's even sometimes, I think, with what Jordan is doing, or even what I'm doing, or like you said, what my brother's book, what it's trying to do is there's a realization that sometimes there's some propositional change that can't happen. It's not about propositional things. It's not about, I'm going to give you the right information, and now with that information, you're going to be able to change. It's not enough. It's actually, the change happens so deep. It's in the very frame of reference. It's in the very stance that you hold in the world. And so it's so hard. You can't, it's almost, you have to, you do it in weird ways. You have to set traps for people. Almost, you have to kind of open up spaces that they fall into suddenly and they don't realize. And all of a sudden they have these shocks of, the Zen Buddhists have this idea of the koan, where you try to bring someone in a space that's so contradictory that they can't reason out of it. And then it shocks them into this transformation. So there are these different, but I think that for sure, this idea of meditating on your sins, like the idea of repentance is an easy way to do it, where you see yourself, you try to see all the places where you don't hit the mark, where you're not in line, and realize that sometimes you can't do anything about it. And then sometimes you get that experience. But that really, the idea of the wounds of Christ related to this, it's something that you find all in Western Christianity. And it's actually a little bit, it's been put aside from a lot of people, because the vision of it looks so weird to modern people. It looks like a kind of masochism or a kind of strange, gory, because you have very extreme images of that, like people drinking from the wounds of Christ, or people, being this kind of mystical imagery of being poured, like the blood of Christ kind of pour over you. And it seems very strange to people, but when you understand what it is that's going on, and you realize what it is, how it's related to the mystery of suffering, to the problem of suffering, and how, at least in Christianity, there's not at all a sense, except for this kind of rather superficial, God, what do they call it? Prosperity gospel types, which are just horrid. That's not what Christianity is. Christianity doesn't tell you you're going to stop suffering if you become a Christian. Then it doesn't tell you you're going to stop lacking all these things. There's a sense in which it's actually going to be transformed. Your suffering can be transformed, not just into a nice, happy, regular life, but into something which is far more glorious, right? Like that little experience you had of seeing the bus come, and suddenly it's as if when you're telling me that story, I feel like you're Alice in Wonderland, and it's like all these magical things happen. But if you describe the phenomena to people, it's just a regular. It's like, why are you so excited about this? It's just something that's going on. But you're the one that's right, because wouldn't you like to live in that moment all the time? Like, wouldn't you love to be able to see the world in these glorious eyes? And it came through your acceptance of your own suffering, where you said, okay, I'm not going to eat, basically. Like I really am I have this rage, I'm angry, I want to eat. And you realize I'm going to accept that it's not going to happen. And then suddenly, yeah.
Yeah. Because it's not going to happen the way I thought it should happen.
Yeah.
It was not going to happen that way. I was wrong. And I was trying to control how things were going to go on. But and I said to Jordan, I accept this, but I hadn't accepted it. That's why the rage came, right? It seemed like it was something I could accept, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
So I was missing something. I was missing some understanding. My body was saying no.
But what you experience, it can help you also kind of understand why ascetics do what they do, and why monks will fast, why there's all these types of behaviors that exist, because it actually does transform the world into a magical place. It's almost like it's a funny joke, because who more enjoys their meal? Like a rich guy that goes to a 5-star, like a 4-star restaurant and has, this amazing service, or someone who's been fasting for 3 weeks and eats a piece of bread? Who actually finds more joy and more like who has the best experience? And it's going to be the monk that's just fasting for 3 weeks and just eats a piece of bread. So there's a reality, which is that if we accept suffering and we accept to kind of willfully die to ourselves, the world actually becomes fuller. And that's hard for people to understand, but your little experience is a good version of that. And so you can see why monks would fast, for example, just for that, just to live in a kind of magical world where everything that you end up receiving is like a gift from heaven, because it's little and it's precious, and it has everything in it. It appears more like a gift, let's say.
Well, I think as we have figured out that we could only eat one thing, it has been a journey on its own, because it's so simple. Our diet is so simple, and there's no leeway. It's only one thing, right? It's only one thing. That has I find it has its perks, because artists often find if they limit their materials, then the creation that comes out of that is other than it would have been if they would have had a lot to choose from. Mm-hmm. And so they find something new, a new way of expressing themselves, because they've limited so much. And so I think that this limiting that we have done, so that I don't eat until like later in the day, I have to wait till my stomach growls in a good way, so that I know. I've learned that that there's sweepers in your intestines that sweep through your system, and when it's done sweeping, that's when your stomach growls. It's like, okay, we're ready. That's
what it is. I don't know.
That's what it is. So in some days, if my stomach growls, I think, oh, right, I'm ready to eat whenever. and that gives me some joy.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, for sure, your whole family seems to be on a very strange kind of fasting, whether you decided to or not. It definitely has made you attentive to, like, you realize you have to, it is a kind of, I guess it's a kind of fasting. It's just very strange fasting where you actually meet.
It's a very strange fasting, but I agree. It's a fasting. And the water. only water. So it's not just what I'm eating, but what I'm drinking that's limited. But it gives me space for other things, right? Because I've limited that. And we know when we first changed our diet, Jordan was like, oh my God, everything is about eating. Yeah. Our society is about sharing food and that's stuff. Right. And we can't limit this. This isn't something that we can limit. He didn't know what it would do to us, but I see it now as it's an opportunity for more other encounters. Yeah.
Well, it also frees up a lot of time.
You don't frees up a lot of time.
Have to like cook all the time because I just, it drives me nuts. Like how much time we spend like getting food, cooking food, doing all that. It's just, well, it's exhausting, but I guess if you just have one thing you're eating and you just prepare it one way and you drink water, that's a lot of energy and thinking time and thinking space that it frees up.
Yeah, it's gone. Yeah. And so I do believe that it's given us more opportunity, or at least me anyway, more opportunity to pursue other things. And it's pretty strange. That's all I can say about it. It's pretty strange. My life, George's life, we don't live at home anymore. We travel all the time. So we're always on the road, and we're preparing to speak to people and try to say something meaningful practically every day. And so it's a very good meditation. It's like a meditation, right? Yeah. And
because at least now that's pretty much all. It's like it's all you're doing. So
that's all we're doing.
Other activity. It's like this is the activity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the activity. Although I go for a walk. I usually go for a walk every day. We went to the Muhammad Ali Museum yesterday.
I didn't know that existed.
I didn't know it existed either. But he's from Louisville.
Oh, that's where you are, and you're in Kentucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Great.
Yeah. So maybe today I'll go to the Slugger, the baseball museum, because it's here. So
I've been to Louisville on a speaking event, but I basically just went to churches. I didn't visit like all the stuff that is in Louisville.
Well, we're here for 3 days. We're here for 3 days, so we actually have some time. But wonderful. Churches is a good idea. Yeah,
there's a great, really wonderful Antiochian Orthodox church here that is astounding. They're super present in the community. They have all these events. They have all these families, and they're very kind of multi-ethnic. That's where I went to speak for a conference, and I was really impressed by just their presence in the community. So,
maybe I could go there this afternoon.
Sure, yeah. I'll send you I forget the name of it, but I'll find it. I'll send it to you for sure.
Okay. Yeah, this whole idea of suffering it's taken on a new meaning for me, not just with my experience, but now with reading the Bible and understanding the stories. And I've always wanted to have that intention, but it was never that necessary. Now it seems necessary. It doesn't, I have no choice. The other thing I have no choice about is that I'm speaking to people, because I prayed to God and said, if I lived, I would share what I had to say. Yeah. And so
there you are.
There I am. Yeah.
I think it's great. I mean, it's been for me so astounding to see, the transformation that you've been through, and just how miraculous it has been for you, and just how it's even changed your countenance, like just even the way you look at people. Like it's definitely changed something very profound about you. So
well, maybe because I've been reading a little of your brother's book, maybe there's more light, more spirit in my system now than matter. That would be good.
That would definitely be good.
That'd be good.
Yeah. It's good to keep a balance. You need a nice balance.
Yeah, but now I see, the sparkle in somebody's eyes.
Mhm.
Now I see that, that sparkle, that's the light, that's the spirit that you see in someone's eyes
No,
when
and
they're inspired, right?
yeah, and I think you're right. You're right also that as you move forward, you become sensitive, or you have a capacity to see things in the world and in others that was you couldn't see before, that it was there, but you just the capacity to discern spirit, you could say, it's a good way to understand it, is something that you find even in spiritual texts. You have the sense even that someone, these great monks, that people that have lived for a very long time in prayer and ascetic practice, they can see through you, right? They meet people, they look at you, and they can see you. You can't hide from them. They can see all the light and all the darkness in you, and you wonder, like, how is that possible? But then, sometimes we have those little experiences ourselves where you look at someone and you see, like you said, you can see that sparkle, or you can see it. You almost see as if there's like some stone on the person that's just weighing them down, and you don't necessarily know why, but you can see the darkness kind of pressing down on them. Mm-hmm. And it's not, we're using metaphorical language, obviously, but it's a real experience that I think everybody has to a certain extent. When you see that in the Bible, it says someone's countenance is fallen, right? Someone's, mm-hmm. You see in their expression that they're, so that's definitely a spiritual capacity that we have. And that as you, let's say, develop your own spiritual practice and as you come closer to God, then that will become more and more, people will become more transparent to you. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, when in the meet and greet where I'm shaking hands with people, many of those people are inspired and they are light. They're bouncy and light. They're not really plodding. They're not plodding. They're bouncy, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful to see that.
It's encouraging. It's encouraging because sometimes we get a sense as everything is kind of going to hell. I have that sense way too often these days. But so meeting someone that has that inner light and that exactly that lightness it's infectious too, in a good way. It transmits itself. You get encouragement from seeing someone that is going in the right direction. So
yes, that's for sure.
That's great.
Yes, the things in the world are worrisome for sure. And I don't know. Well, I just pray for everyone, actually. That's what I do. I don't know what to do, so I just pray for everyone. Everyone. Absolutely every player. I pray for them all.
Yeah, that's great.
Right? Because the only way through this is up. So we got to find the up wherever we can find it.
Yeah, and we sometimes we can get lost in what's going on the big scale, and it's dangerous because there's, like you said, often there's not a lot we can do, and so it can drag us away from what's really happening, which is these relationships that we're in right now. Our families are, and I'm as guilty as anybody of that. Sometimes I'm online and I'm on Twitter, which is the worst. On Twitter is the devil. It's so bad.
It is, isn't it?
So bad. Like it'll just drag the life out of you, just suck it out of you. And then I go back upstairs and my wife is there. She's a human. She's the love of my life. And I'm like, and I'm in my space and she notices. Sometimes she's like, you're not there. You're just not here. If you're not here, then we can't have this relationship. You have to come back. So yeah, it's good to be aware of that and to realize that the impact we can really have is in the lives of the people around us, in our families, in our churches, in our communities. That's where we can actually have some real transformational impact. But to get lost too much in the big abstract stuff is sometimes a ploy to move us away from ourselves.
Yes, true. So I've been thinking, the last time we spoke, we were talking about the Eucharist and the necessity of the Eucharist. And so I said I'd think about it because I wasn't going to eat the wafer, right? But I've been talking to a woman, Catholic woman, and she said that I could accept the wine at communion, and that would be good.
Mhm.
And I think I can have a little sip of wine without a disaster. More than I could have a bite of bite. I don't want to have a bite, but I could have a sip.
Well, you
So-
would, I mean, I think that you would have to, that discussion would need to happen with
With a priest.
yeah. And then,
Right. Okay.
Because there's also, like I said, it's important to understand that if you're going to like take communion, what
Mm-hmm.
that means. Like, it's not just about just going up and getting communion, because they might give it to you. But they might give it to you, just not, they don't know, especially I think in Catholic churches, people just come in, they don't know, like, these people are there. And
Yes.
so they take communion, but
Yeah.
there's a sense in which it's at least in the Christian vision, it's dangerous to take communion if you're not in the right
Part of the church.
yeah, if you haven't received the sacraments, you can't.
Yes.
It's dangerous for you to take communion. So it would be better for sure to talk to a priest and make sure that you're in the right and understand what that means before you. And then for sure there are ways. I'm sure the church has ways to adapt itself to your situation. I don't know what those are, but
Yeah. Yes, understood. And so as I travel around, maybe I will go visit churches. And Jordan, if I suggested that to Jordan, he would be interested, because right now he hasn't been feeling well. So he hasn't really been doing much of anything except for doing the shows.
yeah.
But he's going to get better. It just takes time.
Mm.
Well, thanks for speaking with me again. It's really good to see you.
Yeah.